Hey guys, welcome to CounterSpin. This is my weekly segment called Talking Points Tuesdays, where I show a compilation of a media talking point said over and over by our respected mainstream media. But this week will be a little different. Politicians also repeat talking points, and the media sometimes helps sell their ideas. For example, remember when Iraq developed weapons of mass destruction and aided terrorists? Me neither. But you probably remember the rhetoric from the Bush administration. Even though we now know that never happened, the Bush administration at the time knew they had no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. In a Joint Chief of Staff report drafted on September 9, 2002, called Iraq Status of WMD Programs, Bush's Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, said, "Please take a look at this material as to what we don't know about weapons of mass destruction. It is big." The report concluded that their assessments rely heavily on analytic assumptions and judgment rather than hard evidence. The evidentiary base is particularly sparse for Iraqi nuclear programs. The report even says, "We don't know with any precision how much we don't know." Well, you get the idea. If you want to read more, I'll provide a link of the source in the description. Yet, despite of having this knowledge, the Bush administration publicly came to the conclusion that there were WMDs in Iraq. Here's a clip of all the times Bush repeated the terms terrorism, Iraq, and weapons of mass destruction, all in one speech he gave in 2002, leading up to the Iraq invasion.
Terror, terrorism, terror, terrorist, terror organization, terrorist attacks, terrorism, terrorist network, terrorist attacks, terrorist group, terrorists, terrorists, instruments of terror, a terror network, terror cells, terrorists, terrorizing terror and murder, terrorism, terrorists, or terrorists, a tool of terror and torture. Iraq, weapons of terror, terrible weapons, weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction, dangerous weapons to even more dangerous weapons, biological weapons, chemical agents, chemical weapons, chemical attacks, chemical and biological weapons, chemical and biological weapons, ballistic missiles, chemical or biological weapons, chemical or biological attack, chemical and biological attacks, poisons, deadly gases, the biological or chemical weapon, instruments of terror, the instruments of mass death, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapon, bomb, nuclear weapons, nuclear program, nuclear weapons program, nuclear scientists, nuclear holy warriors, nuclear program and nuclear weapons, nuclear weapon, nuclear technology, biological or chemical or a nuclear weapon. Thanks for coming.
They lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right.
The majority of media outlets played into the fear and lies sold by the Bush administration. A study by the College of Journalism from University of Maryland found most media outlets represented WMD as a monolithic menace, failing to adequately distinguish between weapons programs and actual weapons or to address the real differences among chemical, biological, nuclear, and radiological weapons. And to summarize the rest, the report also says journalists blindly accepted Bush's rhetoric on the war on terror and promoted the fear of weapons of mass destruction being a monolithic menace against Western society. Now, is this the press reacting to 9/11 by blindly trusting the Bush administration out of fear? Or were they actually playing along with the lie? In November 2003, the BBC reported of a former UN Chief Weapons Inspector, Scott Ritter, talking about a propaganda campaign carried out by British intelligence called Operation Mass Appeal. Ritter explained that Iraq's effort to produce WMDs and conceal WMDs was all single-source data of dubious quality which lacked veracity. They took this information and peddled it off to the media, internationally and domestically, allowing inaccurate intelligence data to appear on the front pages. The government, both here in the UK and the US, would feed off these media reports, continuing the perception that Iraq was a nation ruled by a leader with an addiction to WMDs. The Bush administration wasn't alone in spreading these lies. Take a look at the later years of Clinton's administration when talking about WMDs in Iraq.
Crises involving Saddam Hussein, American leadership, and our willingness to stand firm against the continued development of weapons of mass destruction.
But Iraq must understand that our patience is not infinite, and at some point we will have to act to reduce the menace posed by Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and to reduce Iraq's ability to threaten its neighbors.
There should be no doubt Saddam's ability to produce and deliver weapons of mass destruction poses a grave threat to the peace of that region and the security of the world.
And they will be all the more lethal if we allow them to build arsenals of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons and the missiles to deliver them. We simply cannot allow that to happen. There is no more clear example of this threat than Saddam Hussein's Iraq. His regime threatens the safety of his people, the stability of his region, and the security of all the rest of us. If he seeks to rebuild his weapons of mass destruction, we will be prepared to strike him again. Let there be no doubt, we are prepared to act. In the next century, the community of nations may see more and more of the very kind of threat Iraq poses now. A rogue state with weapons of mass destruction, ready to use them or provide them to terrorists, drug traffickers, or organized criminals, and to find and destroy all of Iraq's chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. To find and destroy the missiles to deliver those weapons. To make sure Iraq does not build more. If Iraq fails to comply this time, to provide immediate, unrestricted, unconditional access to the weapons inspectors, there will be serious consequences.
That sounds like the same rhetoric I've talked about in a military-industrial complex, or deep state, that potentially holds more influence than elected officials. Would this be an example of a deep state that is carrying out the same foreign policy, regardless of the administration? Or is this an example of the deep state placing certain politicians as president in order to carry out their agenda? Let me know in the comments below. If you felt like this was important information, please share it. There will also be many videos uploaded this week, so subscribe to stay up to date for more documentaries and reports that go beyond the mainstream.